The funeral home director asked if I needed more time. I sat alone in the front pew, staring at the small white casket that held my son Marcus. 9 years old. Brain cancer. 18 months of treatments, hope, and watching him fight harder than any adult I'd ever known. "Where is your family?" the director asked gently. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing from my parents, my sister Rachel, or anyone else who should have been there. Marcus had been their grandson, their nephew. For 9 years they'd watched him grow, celebrated his birthdays, promised they'd always be there for him. The service was supposed to start at 2 p.m. It was now 2:45 p.m. "We can wait a few more minutes," the director offered. "No," I said quietly. "Let's begin." 23 people came to say goodbye to Marcus. His teachers from school. 3 families from his little league team. My neighbor Mrs. Chin, who used to give him homemade cookies. My co-workers who had covered my shifts during his final weeks. Not one member of my blood family. During the service, I thought about the last conversation I'd had with my parents 3 weeks earlier. Marcus was in hospice care and I'd called to update them on his condition. "How much longer do the doctors think?" Mom had asked. "Maybe days. Maybe weeks. But he's comfortable." "Well, keep us posted," Dad said. "Rachel's engagement party is this weekend, so we'll be pretty busy." Rachel's engagement party. While Marcus was dying. I buried my son on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of dirt hitting the casket. I stayed until the workers finished filling the grave, then drove home to an empty house. My phone buzzed as I walked through the door. A text from my sister Rachel. "Hope everything went okay today. Call me later." Hope everything went okay. My son's funeral. She talked about it like it was a dentist appointment. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table where Marcus used to do his homework. His math workbook was still open to page 47. Multiplication tables. He'd been so proud when he finally memorized the sevens. The next morning, I received a call from Marcus's pediatric oncologist. "I wanted to follow up about the trust fund documentation," Dr. Stevens said. "The Children's Cancer Research Foundation needs the final paperwork to process the donation Marcus wanted to make." Marcus had insisted on setting up a trust fund during his final weeks. He'd saved every birthday check, every tooth fairy dollar, every allowance he'd ever received. $347 in total. He wanted it to go toward helping other kids with cancer. "I'll bring the paperwork by this afternoon," I told Dr. Stevens. "Actually, there's something else. The hospital received an anonymous donation last month. $850,000 to establish a pediatric cancer research fund in Marcus's name. Do you know anything about that?" I set down my coffee cup. "What kind of donation?" The donor specified that the money should be managed through a trust, with the interest funding research grants. The principal can only be accessed by the named trustee in the documentation. "I assumed you knew about it. Can you send me those documents?" "Of course. I'll email them right over." An hour later, I was staring at legal paperwork I'd never seen before. The Marcus Chin Williams Pediatric Cancer Research Trust. Established by an anonymous donor. Principal amount, $850,000. Sole trustee and beneficiary controller, Amanda Williams. Me. My hands shook as I read the donor information. The money had come from my grandfather's estate. Grandpa had died 2 years earlier, leaving behind a complicated will with multiple trusts and delayed distributions. I'd assumed I wasn't mentioned in any of them. According to the documentation, Grandpa had specifically established this trust to be activated upon the death of his great-grandson Marcus, with the funds dedicated to pediatric cancer research. The trust could be used for research, or the trustee could redirect the funds for other purposes if needed. I was still processing this information when my phone rang. "Amanda, it's Mom. We need to talk." "About what?" "About being more considerate of family timing. Rachel's wedding is in 6 months and frankly, your drama yesterday was inconsiderate." "My drama?" "My son's funeral." "What do you want, Mom?" "We know about Marcus's trust fund. Dr. Stevens mentioned it to Rachel when she called the hospital yesterday. $850,000 is a substantial amount, and Rachel's wedding costs are getting out of control." I sat down slowly. Rachel called the hospital? She wanted to send flowers for the service, But you never told us which funeral home you used. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that Marcus is gone, and that money sitting in a trust isn't helping anyone. Rachel needs $200,000 for her dream wedding, and it only makes sense to use some of Marcus's money. Marcus's money. Don't be dense, Amanda. That money came from Grandpa's estate, which makes it family money. Marcus can't use it now and Rachel needs it for her future. It's what Grandpa would have wanted. Grandpa specifically set up this trust for Marcus. And now Marcus is gone, Mom said flatly. Rachel's wedding is at the Four Seasons. The venue alone is $75,000, plus flowers, photography, the dress. She's been planning this for 2 years. She's been planning it for 2 years, but you couldn't plan to attend your grandson's funeral? Amanda, don't be dramatic. We explained about the engagement party. That was already scheduled and people were counting on us. Besides, funerals are depressing, and Rachel needed us to be in a good mood for her celebration. I stared at Marcus's math workbook. Problem number 15. If you have 7 groups of 8 flowers, how many flowers do you have in total? I'm not giving Rachel money from Marcus's trust fund. You're being selfish, Mom snapped. That boy is dead. Rachel is alive and getting married. The money should go to someone who can actually use it. The money is designated for pediatric cancer research. Oh please. You can change that designation. You're the trustee. Just write a check to Rachel and be done with it. No. Amanda, think about what you're doing. This is your sister's wedding. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Marcus's cancer research can be funded by other people. Rachel needs this money now. I hung up. 2 hours later, Rachel called. Mom told me you're being difficult about the trust fund money. I'm not being difficult about anything. Look, I'm sorry about Marcus, okay? I really am. But he's gone and I'm getting married in 6 months. Do you know how much a wedding costs these days? Do you know how much 18 months of cancer treatment costs? That's different. That's medical stuff. This is my wedding. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you're trying to ruin it over money that's just sitting there doing nothing. The money is designated for cancer research. Amanda, be realistic. You can change the designation. You're in charge of it. Just give me $200,000 for the wedding and put the rest toward whatever charity stuff you want. Everyone wins. Marcus wanted the money to help other kids with cancer. Marcus was 9 years old. He didn't understand money or estate planning. You're the adult. You make the adult decisions. The adult decision is to honor his wishes. His wishes. Rachel's voice got shrill. He was a little kid. Little kids wish for ponies and magic powers. Adults make practical decisions about real money. Goodbye, Rachel. Amanda, don't you dare hang up on me. This is my wedding we're talking about. The most important day of my life. You cannot be this selfish. I hung up. The next day Dad called. Your mother and sister are very upset with your attitude about the trust fund. My attitude? Amanda, let's be practical here. Rachel's wedding is costing a fortune, and that money is just sitting in an account earning interest. Marcus doesn't need it anymore and Rachel needs it now. It's simple mathematics. Simple mathematics. Don't repeat everything I say. Just answer the question. Will you write Rachel a check for $200,000 or not? No. Fine. Then we'll have our lawyer look into this trust situation. If Grandpa's estate money was used to fund it, then it's family money and Rachel has as much right to it as anyone else. Actually, Dad, let me read you something. I opened the trust documents on my laptop. The Marcus Chin Williams Pediatric Cancer Research Trust was established with specific instructions from the grantor. The funds are to be used exclusively for pediatric cancer research grants, unless the sole trustee determines that alternative use would better honor the deceased child's memory. See? Alternative use. That's exactly what we're talking about. I'm not finished. The trustee position cannot be challenged or transferred except in cases of death or legal incapacity. The grantor specifically excluded all other family members from any claim to the principal or management of the trust. Silence. Dad? Are you there? Who wrote this trust? Grandpa's estate attorney. The same one who handled his main will. This is ridiculous. Grandpa couldn't have intended for that money to be locked away forever for some research nonsense when his living great-granddaughter needs it for her wedding. Grandpa intended for the money to honor Marcus's memory through cancer research. Marcus is dead, Amanda. Dead children don't have memories to honor. Living people need real money for real expenses. Goodbye, Dad. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. My family was contesting the trust, claiming that the money rightfully belonged to Grandpa's estate and should be distributed equally among his descendants. I called the estate attorney who had handled Grandpa's will. Ms. Williams, I've been expecting your call. Your family's attorney contacted me yesterday with some very interesting theories about your grandfather's intentions. What kind of theories? They're claiming that your grandfather was mentally incompetent when he established the Marcus Trust, and that the money should revert to the main estate for equal distribution. They want $850,000 divided 4 ways. Can they do that? They can try. But I have some documents they might find enlightening. Can you come to my office this afternoon? At 3 p.m. I sat across from attorney Robert Chin, no relation despite the name, as he spread paperwork across his desk. Your grandfather was very specific about this trust, he said. He established it 2 years before Marcus's death when the boy was first diagnosed. He came to my office with medical prognosis reports and a very clear understanding of what he wanted to accomplish. He knew Marcus was going to die. He knew the survival statistics for your son's type of cancer. He wanted to ensure that Marcus's memory would contribute to research that might help other children. He also wanted to ensure that no other family members could access the money for personal use. Why? Robert Chin opened a thick file. He was very explicit about this. He'd watched your family's treatment of you over the years, particularly during Marcus's illness. He was disturbed by their priorities. What do you mean? Let me read you something he dictated for the trust documentation. Chin put on his reading glasses. It is my observation that my granddaughter Amanda has received minimal support from her family during her son's medical crisis. While she has sacrificed her career, savings, and personal well-being to care for Marcus, other family members have prioritized social events and personal expenses over providing assistance. I stared at him. There's more. He specifically referenced Rachel's engagement party being scheduled during Marcus's final weeks, and your parents' decision to prioritize that event over spending time with their dying grandson. He knew about that? He knew about all of it. Your sister asking you for money for wedding dress shopping while you were paying for experimental treatments. Your parents suggesting that you should put Marcus in a state care facility because his treatments were becoming inconvenient for family gatherings. I'd forgotten I'd told Grandpa about those conversations. He was very clear that the trust money should never be accessible to family members who had demonstrated such priorities. In fact, there's a specific clause preventing the funds from being used for weddings, parties, or what he termed frivolous social expenses. What happens if they keep fighting this legally? Robert Chin smiled. They're welcome to try. But your grandfather documented everything. He has recordings. Recordings? Your grandfather was an engineer. He recorded phone conversations with family members during Marcus's illness. He has your sister asking you for money for wedding expenses while you were at the hospital with Marcus. He has your parents discussing whether Marcus's medical equipment made family photos look depressing. My stomach dropped. They said that. Among other things. Would you like to hear the recordings? No. But I want my family to hear them. That can be arranged. The legal challenge hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I arrived at the courthouse to find my parents, Rachel, and their attorney waiting in the hallway. Rachel was wearing a designer dress and carrying a Prada bag. Amanda, let's settle this reasonably, Dad said as I approached. We'll split the money 4 ways. You can still donate your portion to cancer research if you want. That's not how trusts work. Everything can be negotiated, Rachel's attorney interjected. Trust terms can be modified when family circumstances change. No modification necessary, said Robert Chin, appearing beside me with a briefcase. Shall we go in? The hearing lasted 90 minutes. Rachel's attorney argued that Grandpa was mentally incompetent when he established the trust, and that the money should be distributed equally among his descendants for legitimate family expenses, particularly Rachel's upcoming wedding. Robert Chin played 3 recordings. The first was Rachel calling me 2 days after Marcus's cancer recurrence, asking if I could loan her $5,000 for a destination bachelorette party because Marcus's medical drama had made me so depressing to be around that she needed a fun trip to balance out the negative energy. The second was my parents discussing whether they should ask me to move Marcus's hospital bed out of their living room during his recovery from surgery because it would ruin the aesthetic for Rachel's engagement photo shoot. The third was Mom telling Dad that they should skip Marcus's birthday party because celebrating a dying child is morbid, and they didn't want to be associated with that kind of negative energy during Rachel's wedding planning period. Rachel started crying during the second recording. By the third recording, her attorney was shuffling papers and looking uncomfortable. The judge reviewed the trust documents, listened to the recordings, and declared the trust legally sound and uncontestable. The grantor's intentions are clear, she said. The trust funds are designated for pediatric cancer research, and the trustee has sole discretion over their use. The challenge is dismissed. After the hearing, my family waited for me in the parking lot. Those recordings were taken out of context, Mom said immediately. What context makes those statements acceptable? We were stressed, Rachel sobbed. Wedding planning is incredibly stressful and we weren't thinking clearly. Marcus was dying. We know that, Dad said. But we couldn't put our entire lives on hold indefinitely. Rachel's wedding was already planned and deposits were paid. Your grandson was dying and you were worried about deposits. Amanda, you're twisting everything, Mom said. We love Marcus. We loved Marcus. But he's gone now and life has to continue. Rachel's wedding is happening whether you help or not. The question is whether you want to be part of this family or not. I looked at my sister, still crying in her designer dress, thinking about the $850,000 she'd counted on spending on her wedding. I thought about my parents who'd planned an engagement party during their grandson's final weeks. I thought about Marcus who'd saved every dollar he ever received to help other kids with cancer. The trust money will go to pediatric cancer research, I said. All of it. Exactly as Marcus wanted. You're making a mistake, Dad said. Family is more important than strangers' kids. Marcus was family too. I drove home and went to Marcus's room, which I'd kept exactly as he'd left it. His baseball gloves on the dresser. His astronomy books stacked beside the bed. His drawing of our family on the wall, where I was labeled Best Mom Ever in purple crayon. The trust money would fund research grants for the next 20 years. Every time a researcher received a Marcus Chin Williams grant, they'd know that a 9-year-old boy who fought cancer had wanted to help other children fight it too. Rachel's wedding would happen at the Four Seasons. She'd find the money somewhere else, probably by taking out loans against her future inheritance or asking her wealthy fiancé's family for help. My parents would attend and smile for photos and pretend their priorities had always been reasonable. I would not be invited to the wedding. 2 weeks later, I received Rachel's wedding invitation in the mail. My name was not on the guest list, but there was a handwritten note. Amanda, you're welcome to attend if you reconsider your position about the trust fund. The offer for $200,000 still stands if you change your mind before the RSVP deadline. We'd love to have you there, but we understand if you choose money over family. Rachel. I threw the invitation away and wrote a check to the Children's Hospital for $50,000 from the trust's first annual disbursement. The memo line read, "In memory of Marcus Chin Williams, who wanted to help other kids fight cancer." Marcus had been right about the 7 times tables. 7 times 8 is equal to 56. He'd figured it out 2 days before he died, proud that he could finally do the whole page without help. The research funded by his trust would help 56 children in its first year alone.
This house is mine now, just leave. Amanda's voice echoed through the hallway as I stood in my doorway, still wearing my hospital scrubs after a 12-hour shift. My sister-in-law stood in my living room, surrounded by boxes and suitcases, looking triumphant. I gripped my keys tightly, my exhaustion suddenly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. "How did you get in here, Amanda?" She tossed her perfectly styled hair over her shoulder, that familiar smug smile playing on her lips. "Mike gave me his key. He agrees it's time for you to go. This house is too big for just one person anyway." Mike, my husband's brother. Of course he'd given her the spare key I'd asked him to hold during emergencies. I should have known better. "Really?" I kept my voice steady, years of handling emergency room crises coming in handy. And what makes you think you have any right to my house? Amanda's smile widened as she pulled out her phone, showing me a text conversation. The family agrees. Mom and Dad think it's ridiculous that you're rattling around in this big house alone while I'm stuck in that tiny apartment. Besides, you're not really family anymore, are you? Not since James. She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Not since James died, my husband. Her cousin. The unspoken words hit like a physical blow, but I refused to let her see how much it hurt. Instead, I smiled. Thank you, Amanda. Her triumphant expression faltered. What? Thank you for making this so easy. I couldn't have asked for better timing. Now she looked completely confused, her perfectly manicured hand gripping her phone tighter. What are you talking about? I set my bag down, taking out my own phone. You broke into my house. You've admitted the family conspired to force me out. And you've documented it all in those lovely texts. My security cameras caught everything else. I gestured to the small device in the corner she hadn't noticed. Would you like to leave on your own, or should I call the police? Amanda's face flushed red. You wouldn't dare. The family won't stand for it. The family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the same family that's been trying to push me out since James died? The ones who've been whispering behind my back, making plans for my house as if I don't exist? I stepped closer, my voice dropping. Let me make something very clear. This house, it's mine. James left it to me. Not to you, not to the family, to me, and I have something none of you know about. Amanda's confidence wavered. You're bluffing. Mom and Dad said. Your parents don't know everything. I cut her off. James and I had our own plans, our own secrets. Would you like to find out what they are in front of a judge? She stared at me, uncertainty creeping into her expression. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the outsider who married into their precious family. They'd seen my silence as weakness, my grief as an opportunity. They had no idea what James and I had prepared for. You have exactly 1 hour to get your things and leave, I said, checking my watch. After that, I'm calling my lawyer. And trust me, Amanda, you don't want that. You'll regret this, she spat, but her hands shook as she started gathering her belongings. When Mom and Dad hear. They'll hear about it, I assured her. In fact, I'm counting on it. You've just made everything so much simpler. As Amanda rushed around, throwing her things back into boxes, I sat calmly on my couch, the one James and I had picked out together, and started typing out a message to my lawyer. The security footage was already backed up, Amanda's attempted takeover documented in perfect detail. James had always said his family would show their true colors eventually. They're vultures, he told me during one of our late-night talks. The minute they sense weakness, they'll swoop in. That's why we'd made arrangements, set up protections that none of them knew about. I watched Amanda struggle with her boxes, her perfect hair now disheveled, her confidence shattered. Part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction, but mostly I felt tired. Tired of their schemes, tired of defending what was rightfully mine. Time's almost up. I called out as she made another trip to her car. She shot me a venomous look but moved faster. My phone buzzed. A text from Mike. Amanda says you're threatening her. This isn't what James would have wanted. I didn't bother responding. They played the James card for the last time. Tomorrow they'd learn exactly what James had wanted, what he planned for, and none of them were going to like it. As Amanda finally loaded the last box, she turned to me, her mascara slightly smeared. You have no idea what you're starting. I smiled, thinking of the envelope in my safe, the one James had left with specific instructions. No, Amanda, you have no idea what you just finished. The door closed behind her with a satisfying click. I sat in the sudden quiet, looking around at the home James and I had built together. On the mantel, our wedding photo smiled back at me. James had known this day might come. He'd made sure I was ready for it. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. Hi, David. It's time. They made their move, just like James said they would. Let's show them what we've been holding onto. The next morning, I sat in David's office, watching as he laid out the documents James had entrusted him with. 3 years of meticulous planning spread across his mahogany desk. Everything's in order, David said, adjusting his glasses. James was thorough. He knew exactly what his family would try to do. I picked up one of the papers, a detailed account of every loan, the family had taken from James over the years, complete with dates, amounts, and their promises to repay. None of them ever had. "How soon can we proceed?" I asked, thinking of Amanda's threats. "I've already filed the initial paperwork. But first," David handed me an envelope still sealed. "James left instructions for this to be opened only if they tried to force you out of the house." My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter written in James's familiar handwriting. "My dearest love, if you're reading this, they've finally shown their true colors. I'm sorry I'm not there to protect you from them, but I made sure you have everything you need to protect yourself." What they don't know, what I never told them, is that every loan they took came with conditions. Every time they borrowed money, they signed agreements. Mom, Dad, Mike, Amanda. They were all so eager for quick cash that they never read the fine print. Those agreements, they're all legally binding. If they ever try to force you out of our home, every loan becomes due immediately, with interest. Don't let them bully you. Don't let them use my memory against you. Show them exactly who you are. All my love, James. I looked up at David, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. "How much do they owe?" He slid a spreadsheet across the desk. The total at the bottom made my eyes widen. "With compounded interest over the years," David said, "they owe you just over $487,000. The front desk called. Amanda's parents had arrived right on schedule. David raised an eyebrow. "Ready?" I straightened my spine, tucking James's letter safely in my bag. "Let them in." Robert and Marie swept into the office like they owned it, with Amanda trailing behind. One look at their faces told me they'd expected to intimidate me into submission. "This has gone far enough," Robert began, not bothering with pleasantries. "Amanda told us about your ridiculous threats. We've been patient with you since James passed, but—" "Patient?" I interrupted, my voice cold. "Is that what you call trying to steal my house?" Marie stepped forward, her expensive perfume filling the air. "That house belongs in the family. James would have." "Would have what?" I pushed the documentation toward them. "Would have wanted you to repay the money you borrowed from him." The color drained from Robert's face as he looked at the papers. "These are private family matters." "They're legal matters," David corrected. "And according to these signed agreements, the full amount is now due." Amanda snatched one of the documents, her eyes scanning frantically. "This isn't possible. James would never." "James did," I said quietly. "He kept track of everything. Every time you needed money for a new car, Robert. Every time Marie wanted to remodel. Amanda's failed business venture. Mike's gambling debts. James helped you all, and you never paid back a cent." "We're family," Marie protested weakly. "Family?" I stood up, James's letter giving me strength. "Family doesn't try to steal from each other. Family doesn't use someone's death as an opportunity to take what isn't theirs." David cleared his throat. "You have two options. You can pay the full amount within 30 days, or we can take this to court. Given the documented break-in attempt yesterday, I don't think you want this in front of a judge." Robert's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is extortion." "No," I said calmly. "This is consequences. You tried to take my home. Now I'm taking back what you owe me, what you owe James." Amanda slumped in her chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting her. "We don't have that kind of money." "Then I suggest you start selling things," I replied. "Maybe start with that beach house you bought with James's money, Robert. Or your precious art collection, Marie." They left David's office in shocked silence, the weight of their actions finally catching up to them. As the door closed behind them, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. "James would be proud," David said quietly. "He knew they'd try something like this eventually. That's why he kept such detailed records." "James would be proud," David said quietly. "He knew they'd try something like this eventually. That's why he kept such detailed records." I nodded, touching a letter in my bag. James had known his family better than they'd known themselves. He'd seen through their facade of affection to the greed beneath. "What happens now?" I asked. David smiled. "Now, we wait. But trust me, they'll pay. They have too much to lose if this goes public." Walking out of his office, I felt lighter than I had in months. James had given me one final gift, the means to stand up to his family and the strength to use it. 1 month later, I stood in my kitchen, sipping coffee and watching a morning sun stream through the windows James and I had picked out together. The house felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. The weight of his family's expectations and schemes had lifted, replaced by a quiet strength I'd found in standing my ground. My phone buzzed with a text from David. All payments received. The transfers are complete. I smiled, remembering the series of events that had unfolded over the past month. Robert and Marie had sold their beach house. Amanda had surrendered her luxury car, and Mike had been forced to liquidate his investment portfolio. They'd scraped together every penny they owed, knowing the alternative would be public exposure of their actions. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Marie standing alone on my porch, looking smaller somehow without her usual air of superiority. After a moment's hesitation, I opened the door. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual command. I stepped aside, letting her enter the home she tried to take from me. She perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. "James knew, didn't he?" she finally said. "He knew we'd try something like this." "Yes," I replied simply. "He knew exactly who you were." Marie's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, not the manipulative displays I'd seen before. "We lost everything. Not just the money, but our reputation. Nobody in our social circle will look at us the same way again." "You lost what you never really owned," I corrected her. "Everything you had was built on James's generosity you abused." She nodded slowly, looking around the living room at the photos of James and me, the life we built together. "I didn't understand until now. Why he chose you, why he trusted you more than us. You were never after his money or status. You just loved him." "I still do," I said quietly. Marie stood, smoothing her now wrinkled skirt. "Amanda's moving out of state. She can't face anyone here anymore. Robert, he's not speaking to anyone. Our family is broken." "Your family broke itself," I replied. "James gave you every chance to do the right thing. You chose greed instead." She walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for what we tried to do, but for how we treated you after James died. We were wrong." After she left, I went to my bedroom and opened the small box where I kept James's most personal letters. At the bottom was a photo of us on our wedding day, his family arranged around us, all smiles and false warmth. He'd known even then what lay beneath those smiles. "They'll never understand real love," he told me once. "They only understand possession." My phone buzzed again. A message from my best friend Lucy. "Dinner tonight? Time to celebrate your victory." I smiled, typing back a quick yes. James's family had tried to isolate me, to push me out of the life he and I had built. Instead, they'd only proved why he'd worked so hard to protect me from them. Later that evening, sitting in my garden with Lucy, sharing wine and stories, I felt truly at peace for the first time since James's death. To James, Lucy raised her glass. "The man who loved you enough to make sure you'd always be protected." To James, I echoed, looking up at the stars we used to watch together. "And to standing your ground." The house around us was more than just walls and windows now. It was a testament to love that extended beyond death, to the strength that comes from knowing your own worth. James's family had tried to take it all away, but in doing so, they'd only made me stronger. I kept my home, my dignity, and most importantly, the truth of James's love. In the end, that was worth more than all the money they'd been forced to repay. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but I was ready for them. James had given me the tools I needed, but the strength to use them, that had been inside me all along. The steady beeping of hospital monitors was the first thing I heard as consciousness slowly returned. My eyelids felt heavy, but I forced them open, squinting against the harsh fluorescent lights. A nurse dropped her clipboard in shock when she saw me awake. Doctor, come quickly. She's awake," she called out, rushing to my bedside. My name is Emma Sullivan, and I had just woken up from a 2-month coma. The last thing I remembered was driving home from work on a rainy evening. Now I was lying in a hospital bed, my body weak from disuse, trying to piece together what had happened. As medical staff swarmed around me, conducting tests and checking vitals, I caught fragments of their conversations. Miraculous recovery, against all odds, brain activity returned. But it was a different conversation that made my blood run cold. One I had heard while in my comatose state. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had visited regularly, but not out of concern for my well-being. I remembered her voice, cruel and calculating, as she spoke on the phone next to my bed. Yes, I'm selling Emma's house. She's not waking up anyway, and my daughter needs a place to live. The doctors say she's brain dead. It's the perfect opportunity. The memory made me want to scream, but my throat was too dry from the breathing tube that had just been removed. I had heard everything during those 2 months, every scheming conversation, every manipulative plan. Patricia had no idea that coma patients could sometimes hear their surroundings. Mrs. Sullivan, the doctor's voice brought me back to the present. Can you understand me? Blink twice if you can. I blinked twice, and he smiled encouragingly. Good. You've been in a coma for about 2 months following a severe car accident. Your recovery is remarkable, but you'll need time to regain your strength. As my voice slowly returned over the next few hours, I asked the nurse to contact my best friend, Sophie, instead of my husband, Mark. I needed to know exactly what had happened while I was unconscious, and I knew Sophie would tell me the truth. Sophie arrived within an hour, tears streaming down her face as she hugged me carefully. Emma, oh my God, I can't believe you're awake. I've been so worried. Sophie, my voice was hoarse but urgent, tell me about my house. What has Patricia done? Sophie's expression darkened. How did you? Never mind. It's bad, Emma. Patricia convinced Mark that you'd want your house to go to his sister, Ashley. She forged your signature on some documents while you were in the coma. They've already started moving Ashley's things in. I closed my eyes, remembering more snippets from my comatose state. Patricia's voice. Mark, darling, Emma would want Ashley to have the house. You know how close they were. The truth was, Ashley and I barely spoke, and Patricia had always resented that I owned the house outright, an inheritance from my grandmother. Where's Mark now? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He's been staying at Patricia's house. With Ashley. He said it was too painful to be in your house alone. But Sophie hesitated. But he's been helping them steal it from me, I finished. The betrayal hurt, but not as much as I expected. During my coma, I'd heard enough of Mark's conversations with his mother to know he wasn't the man I thought I'd married. What they didn't know, what Patricia hadn't bothered to check in her rush to seize my property, was that my grandmother had been smarter than that. The house wasn't just deeded to me. It was held in an irrevocable trust with specific conditions. My grandmother had seen enough family drama in her lifetime to know the importance of protecting assets. Sophie, I said, reaching for her hand, I need you to contact Benjamin Wright, my grandmother's lawyer. Don't tell anyone else I'm awake yet. Not Mark, not Patricia, no one. Emma, what are you planning? I managed a small smile, remembering Patricia's last visit just yesterday. She'd been on the phone with a real estate agent, discussing rental prices for my house. Completely confident in her victory, Patricia thinks she's won because I was brain dead. But I heard everything. Every plan, every lie, every scheme. I know exactly what they've done, and more importantly, I know what they're planning to do next. Sophie squeezed my hand, understanding dawning in her eyes. And you recorded everything, didn't you? With that new medical proxy app you told me about before the accident, the one that records all conversations in the patient's room. I nodded slowly. Every word. But first, let them think they've won. I want to see their faces when they realize I heard everything they said while I was gone. As Sophie left to make the call to Benjamin, I lay back in my hospital bed, conserving my strength. Patricia had no idea that her bedside confessions had sealed her fate. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting your enemies think they've won, until the perfect moment to prove them wrong. The doctor said I would need a few more days in the hospital to regain my strength. That was fine with me. It would give Benjamin time to prepare everything we needed. Patricia and Mark thought they had staged the perfect plot during my coma. They were about to learn that sometimes playing dead is the best way to catch the snake in your garden. 3 days after waking up, I was still in the hospital when I heard Patricia's shrill voice echoing down the hallway. My heart raced, but I quickly closed my eyes, maintaining steady breathing. The door opened and I could smell her overwhelming perfume. Still no change, she said loudly, presumably on her phone. Ashley's already redecorated half the house. We should have the rental agreement signed by next week. The extra income will be perfect for her wedding plans. I felt her move closer to my bed. Can you believe the doctors still want to run tests? They should just let nature take its course. It's been 2 months. She's not coming back. Just then my phone, which Sophie had placed on my bedside table, pinged with a message. Patricia went silent. Hello. She moved closer, probably trying to see the screen. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Benjamin Wright. Why is Emma's grandmother's lawyer messaging her now? The rustle of movement told me she was reaching for my phone. That's when I opened my eyes. I wouldn't touch that if I were you, Patricia. Her scream was everything I'd hoped for. She stumbled backward, face pale as if she'd seen a ghost. In a way, she had. Emma? But you're brain dead. I finished for her, my voice stronger now after days of therapy. That's what you've been telling everyone, isn't it? Along with all those plans for my house. She recovered quickly, smoothing her expensive blouse. You must be confused, dear. The doctor said you had minimal brain activity. We were just trying to do what's best for everyone. By forging my signature, by planning to rent out my house, by convincing Mark I'd want Ashley to have everything. Her eyes narrowed. You can't prove any of that. You were in a coma. I reached for my phone, pulling up the recording app. Actually, I can prove all of it. It's amazing what technology can do these days. Did you know there's an app that records everything said in a patient's room once it's activated by their medical proxy? The color drained from her face again. You recorded. Everything, I confirmed. Every visit, every phone call, every scheme you plotted by my bedside. Would you like to hear some highlights? Like when you told Ashley she could sell my grandmother's antiques, or when you planned to claim I'd verbally promised the house to her before my accident. Patricia's hands were shaking now. Those recordings won't hold up. You were unconscious. Maybe not on their own, I agreed. But combined with the forged documents you submitted, the fake witness statements, Benjamin has been quite busy gathering evidence. She straightened up, trying to regain control. Mark won't let you do this. He agrees Ashley deserves. Mark lost any say in this when he chose to help steal from his comatose wife. I cut her off. But please, keep talking. The app is still recording. The door opened again, and Sophie walked in with Benjamin Wright. Patricia's face went from white to gray. Mrs. Watson, Benjamin said formally, addressing Patricia. I've been hoping to speak with you about some concerning documents that were recently filed. Patricia grabbed her purse, heading for the door. I don't have to listen to this. You were half dead, Emma. We did what needed to be done. No, Patricia, I called after her. You did what you wanted to do, thinking I'd never wake up to stop you. That was your mistake. She paused at the door, turning back with a sneer. You don't have the strength for this fight. Look at you, you can barely sit up. I smiled, holding up my phone. I don't need strength. I just needed you to keep talking. And you did, day after day, sitting right here, laying out every detail of your plans. Would you like to know what else I recorded while you thought I couldn't hear? She fled, her heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. Benjamin placed a thick folder on my lap. Everything's ready, he said. The trust documents, the recordings, the evidence of fraud. Would you like me to proceed? I nodded, thinking of Ashley already redecorating my home. Mark helping her move in, Patricia orchestrating everything from the shadows. Yes, I said firmly. It's time they learned who they were really dealing with. Sophie sat beside me, squeezing my hand. Mark's been calling me, asking if I've heard anything about your condition. Has he visited even once since they started moving Ashley in? She shook her head. Then he's made his choice, I said, opening the folder Benjamin had brought. Now it's time for me to make mine. As I signed the papers authorizing Benjamin to proceed with legal action, I thought about Patricia's words. You don't have the strength for this fight. She was wrong. Sometimes strength isn't about physical power. Sometimes it's about lying still, listening carefully, and waiting for the perfect moment to show your enemies exactly how badly they've underestimated you. Benjamin, I said, handing him back the signed documents, make sure they understand one thing. This is just the beginning. 1 week later, I sat in Benjamin's office, watching the security camera from my house. Inside, Patricia, Mark, and Ashley were laughing and planning a party, still thinking I was in a coma. They were celebrating after stealing from me. Are you ready? Benjamin asked, fixing his tie. I nodded and adjusted the blanket on my hospital wheelchair. I could walk a little now, but we decided to make it look like I was still weak. We wanted them to think I wasn't a threat. Sophie pushed me to the front door, My house with my key they never found. Their faces when I rolled in were unforgettable. "Hello, family," I said calmly. "Having a party without me?" Ashley dropped her wine glass. Mark went pale. But Patricia, always pretending to care, spoke first. "Emma, thank God you're okay. We were just taking care of the house for you. By selling my grandmother's antiques." I pointed to the empty spaces. "By planning to rent it out?" "Emma," Mark said, stepping forward, "you're still healing. You don't understand." "Play it," I told Sophie. She held up her tablet. Patricia's voice came through. "Once we get rid of her things, no one will remember she lived here. Mark, Ashley will make this house what it was always meant to be." Then Mark's voice. "Emma never appreciated this place anyway." More clips played, every cruel thing they said and planned while I was in the hospital. You recorded us?" Ashley asked, shocked. "Every word," I said. "And we gave it all to the police. They're very interested in people committing fraud against someone in a coma." Patricia stepped forward angrily. "You ungrateful little—" "Mrs. Watson," Benjamin said firmly, "watch your words. You're already in trouble." "You can't prove anything," she snapped. I smiled and shut my phone. Actually, I already did. This whole talk is being recorded and live streamed to the police. Just then, the front door opened. 2 police officers walked in. Patricia's face fell. As they were taken away, Mark tried one last time. "Emma, please. We can fix this. I'm still your husband." "No, Mark. You stopped being my husband when you tried to steal from me while I was fighting to live." After they were gone, Sophie helped me out of the wheelchair. We walked around my home, looking at everything that needed to be fixed. "You know," Sophie said, "your grandma would be proud. She always said you were stronger than anyone knew." I smiled and touched the wall where her portrait would hang again. She taught me well. Patricia never read the trust documents. My grandma made sure no one could ever take this house from me. In the weeks that followed, justice was served. Patricia was charged with fraud and forgery. Ashley had to return what she stole. Mark got divorce papers and moved back in with his mom. Their dreams of easy money were over. Patricia sent me a letter from jail. "You ruined everything. We were going to be a real family." I wrote back, "Real family doesn't steal from someone in a coma." 6 months later, I stood in my fully restored home, hosting a different kind of party. Sophie, Benjamin, and the hospital staff were there. The house was filled with laughter and love, just as it should be. "To Emma," Sophie said, raising her glass, "who showed us that the best revenge is staying quiet and letting others expose themselves." I smiled, thinking of Patricia, Mark, and Ashley. They thought I was weak. They never knew I was waiting for the right moment. My grandmother's portrait looked down at me. I could almost hear her say, "The strongest people are often the quietest. They watch, wait, and strike at the right time." She was right. I didn't need to fight or yell. I just had to wait until the time was right to show them they had never truly won. The house was mine again. My life was mine. And my future was bright. Sometimes the best ending comes not from fighting your enemies, but from proving they never should have underestimated you. "Only my real daughter deserves to be a mother first." Margaret's voice oozed satisfaction through the phone. "I swapped your fertility meds for sugar pills weeks ago. Amanda needs this more than you." My fingers curled around the edge of my desk, the rage simmering beneath a veneer of calm. "Thank you for confirming that, Margaret," I said evenly. Silence stretched across the line. She'd expected sobbing, begging, anything but this cold composure. "My name is Olivia Chen. I'm 32 years old, and I just received verbal confirmation that my mother-in-law had deliberately sabotaged my IVF treatment. Also, her biological daughter could become a mother first." What Margaret didn't know was that I'd already discovered her treachery 3 weeks ago. "What do you mean?" she asked, her smugness beginning to fray. "Nothing," I said smoothly. "I have to go. Dr. Roberts is expecting me." I ended the call before she could speak again. Dr. Roberts wasn't just my fertility specialist. She was the one who'd helped me unravel everything. The inconsistencies in my medication, the strange shape of the tablets, the altered coding. I'm a pharmaceutical researcher. I don't miss details like that. When the first round of IVF failed despite textbook perfect conditions, something didn't sit right. So I installed a discreet camera in my home office, where I kept my medication. That footage showed Margaret using her spare key, one James insisted she keep for emergencies, to sneak in, replace my prescriptions, and smile as she worked. "This is criminal," Dr. Roberts had said, jaw tight as she watched the footage. "Tampering with fertility drugs isn't just cruel, it's a felony." Together, we laid a trap. I faked a second round of treatment, preserved every swapped out pill, and documented each step. And now, with Margaret's confession on record, we had everything we needed. My phone buzzed. "Amanda, Mom told me the good news. I'm pregnant. Guess you'll have to wait your turn." I stared at the screen, remembering the years of little sabotages, accidental spills, snide comments masked as compliments, constant jabs about how a real woman would have given James children by now. And James, my husband of 5 years, had stayed willfully blind through it all. "She's just traditional," he'd said. "She means well." Even when I told him I suspected someone was tampering with my meds, he'd brushed it off. "You're being paranoid. Mom would never." My office phone rang again. "Margaret." I let it go to voicemail. A new email blinked onto my screen. "My lawyer." Everything was ready. One word from me and the case would move forward. Footage, documentation, preserved evidence, and now Margaret's own voice confessing her crime. Another ping. "Amanda again. Mom says you're ignoring her calls. Don't be jealous just because I'm going to be a mom first." I exhaled slowly, remembering Dr. Roberts' quiet reassurance just days ago. "You're healthy, Olivia. Once we remove the interference, there's no reason this shouldn't work." What she did is unforgivable, but not irreversible. James texted next. "Mom says you're acting cold about Amanda's news. Can't you just be happy for her?" I rose, gathering my bag and the folder filled with evidence. Time for my meeting with Dr. Roberts, which was really a final review session with my lawyer. As I drove, I recalled the moment I first watched Margaret on the footage, her expression victorious as she held up the fake pills, snapping a selfie like a trophy hunter. "Amanda will be first," she whispered into the silence. "The way it should be." But the flaw in her plan, she thought I wouldn't fight back. That I was just the career-focused outsider who'd never truly belong. She didn't realize every step she took was another nail in her coffin. I parked outside the lawyer's office, checking my phone. 5 missed calls from Margaret, 3 from James, another text from Amanda. "Mom's worried. She says you're acting weird. Don't forget, family comes first." Family comes first. I smiled at the irony as I stepped into the crisp afternoon air, evidence folder in hand. Margaret was about to learn what happens when you weaponize motherhood, and just how far I was willing to go to reclaim mine. The lawyer's office was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning as we reviewed the evidence. Sarah Martinez, my attorney, spread the documents across her desk methodically. Medical records, video footage stills, photos of the tampered medications, and a transcript of Margaret's phone confession. "This is more than enough for criminal charges," Sarah said, her expression grim. "Tampering with prescription medications is a felony. We're talking potential jail time." I nodded, thinking about how Margaret's smug smile would fade when she realized the gravity of her actions. Another text buzzed through. "James again. Mom's really upset. She says you're threatening her. What's going on?" "Your husband still doesn't know?" Sarah asked, noting my expression. "He's about to," I replied, checking the time. "I've arranged a family meeting tonight. Everyone will be there. James, Margaret, Amanda, even my father-in-law Robert." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you want to do it this way?" "They've all played their part in this," I said firmly. "Margaret did the switching, but Amanda knew about it, and James chose to ignore every warning sign. They all need to face this together." By the time I arrived home, James was already there, pacing the living room. "What's this about a family meeting?" he demanded. "Mom's freaking out, and Amanda says you're acting weird." I set my evidence folder on the coffee table. "We'll discuss everything when everyone arrives. I've ordered dinner. Should be here in 20 minutes. James ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he shared with his mother. "Liv, if this is about Amanda's pregnancy, it's about a lot more than that." I cut him off, my voice steady. "Just wait." The doorbell rang at exactly 6. Margaret burst in first, her face flushed with artificial concern. "Olivia, darling, we've been so worried. This behavior isn't like you at all." Amanda followed, one hand protectively over her stomach, while Robert brought up the rear, looking uncomfortable as usual. I gestured to the dining room where I'd set up my laptop. Please, everyone have a seat. There's something you need to see. Really, Olivia? Margaret started. If you're upset about Amanda's blessing. Play the video, I said to James, who stood near the laptop. He hesitated, then pressed play. The footage was crystal clear. Margaret entering my home office, carefully switching my medications, taking selfies with the fake pills. The audio picked up her running commentary perfectly. Amanda deserves this. Olivia's too career-focused. My real daughter should be first. The color drained from Margaret's face. Amanda's mouth fell open. Robert stared at his wife in horror. But it was James' reaction that hurt the most. The way his eyes widened in recognition, finally forced to acknowledge what he'd refused to see. Turn it off, Margaret demanded, her voice shrill. No, I said calmly. There's more. I placed the medical documents on the table. Dr. Roberts documented everything. The tampered medications, the failed treatment due to interference, the potential health risks of switching prescription drugs. You were spying on me. Margaret tried to sound outraged, but fear had crept into her voice. No, Margaret, I was protecting myself. After years of your self-sabotage, I knew to be careful. But this? I held up the video stills. This crossed a line. You interfered with medical treatment. You tampered with prescription medications. You potentially put my health at risk. Mom, Amanda's voice was small. You said those were just vitamins you were switching. I turned to my sister-in-law. You knew? Amanda's silence was answer enough. James stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. How could you? He asked his mother, his voice cracking. How could you do this to my wife? Margaret's facade finally cracked. I did it for Amanda. She deserves to be a mother first. Olivia's not even family. She's just some career woman Who what? I interrupted. Who loved your son. Who tried for years to be part of this family despite your constant undermining. Who wanted to give you grandchildren but had to watch you sabotage that dream. Robert spoke for the first time. Margaret, do you realize what you've done? This is criminal behavior. Actually, I said, pulling out one final document, it's worse than that. I slid the paper toward Margaret. This is a cease and desist letter from my lawyer. We have enough evidence for criminal charges, but I'm giving you a choice. The room fell silent as Margaret stared at the letter, her hands shaking. James moved to stand beside me, finally choosing a side after years of walking the fence. What kind of choice? Amanda asked, her hand still protectively over her stomach. I met Margaret's eyes across the table. You have 24 hours to decide. Either you seek counseling, admit your actions to the entire family, and stay completely out of my medical decisions, or we press charges. Your call. I met Margaret's eyes across the table. You have 24 hours to decide. Either you seek counseling, admit your actions to the entire family, and stay completely out of my medical decisions, or we press charges. Your call. The next 24 hours transformed our family completely. Margaret, faced with irrefutable evidence and the threat of criminal charges, crumbled. Her carefully constructed image of the perfect mother-in-law shattered, leaving behind a woman who had to confront the consequences of her actions. She chose counseling. The family meeting where she had to confess everything was brutal but necessary. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone gathered as Margaret explained how she tampered with my fertility medications, how she prioritized Amanda's pregnancy over my health, how years of manipulation had led to this moment. I was wrong, she admitted, her voice small and unfamiliar. I convinced myself I was protecting our family's legacy, but I was just being cruel. Amanda, despite her pregnancy, couldn't look at her mother. The revelation that she'd been complicit, even in a small way, had shaken her. After the meeting, she pulled me aside, tears in her eyes. I never thought it would go this far, she whispered. Mom said she was just giving me a fair chance. But I'm so sorry, Olivia. I should have told you. James took it the hardest, learning that his mother had deliberately harmed his wife's chances of having a child. It broke something in him. He spent hours in our backyard that evening, just sitting and processing everything. When he finally came inside, his eyes were red. I failed you, he said, taking my hands in his. I should have believed you, should have protected you. I was so caught up in keeping the peace that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. I squeezed his hands. We both needed this wake-up call. 3 months later, Our lives had shifted dramatically. Margaret attended weekly counseling sessions, working through her issues with control and favoritism. Robert, finally stepping up after years of passive acceptance, made sure she kept every appointment. Amanda's pregnancy progressed, but our relationship changed too. The competition Margaret had created between us dissolved, replaced by a tentative friendship. She started asking for genuine advice about pregnancy, sharing her fears and hopes without her mother's influence. "I want my baby to have cousins," she told me one afternoon over coffee. "Real family, not this twisted version Mom created." As for my IVF journey, Dr. Roberts started me on a new treatment plan. This time, with proper medication and without interference, things were different. The first positive pregnancy test came 6 months after the confrontation. I told James first, of course. He cried, holding me close and whispering apologies and promises. Then we told Amanda, who hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Even Margaret, in her counseling-mandated boundaries, sent a simple text. "Congratulations, I'm truly happy for you both." The day I hit 12 weeks, we had another family gathering. Not for confrontation this time, but celebration. 2 pregnancies, 2 new lives growing, free from the weight of competition and manipulation. Looking around at our healing family, I caught Margaret watching me. She aged years in these months, the consequence of facing her actions. But there was something different in her eyes now, not the calculating look I'd known for so long, but something softer, more genuine. "I have something for you," she said quietly, handing me an envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten and tear-stained. An apology, not just for the medication tampering, but for every slight, every manipulation, every moment she'd made me feel less than. At the bottom was a promise, witnessed by her therapist, to respect our boundaries and seek help when her controlling urges surfaced. "I want to be part of their lives," she said, glancing at my stomach, "but I know I have to earn that right." James wrapped his arm around me, protective in a way he'd learned to be. "One day at a time, Mom," he said. "One day at a time." As I placed my hand over my growing bump, I realized that sometimes the greatest victories come not from destroying our enemies, but from transforming them. Margaret's attempt to sabotage my happiness had backfired, creating instead a stronger family, one built on truth and accountability rather than manipulation and favoritism. Amanda and I now share the same due date month. 2 cousins who will grow up together, free from the toxic competition that almost destroyed us. And Margaret? She's learning, slowly but surely, that family isn't about control or favoritism. It's about love, support, and sometimes the courage to face our own worst selves. James kissed my temple, his hand joining mine over our growing miracle. "You know what, Liv? Your strength didn't just give us a baby. It gave us all a second chance." Looking around at our healing family, I couldn't help but agree. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment, it's growth. And we were all finally growing together.